Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about the European Age of Exploration and a term that you've seen by now, I hope, have maybe looked up and tried to understand, a term called the Oceanic Revolution, right? I'm going to explain today what drove Europeans to embark upon the Age of Exploration. Um, by age of exploration, we're referring to what takes place after the Columbia sort of the Columbian moment, right? Or even before then. When Columbus attempts to get funding from Portugal, is denied, so he goes to Spain, gets funding, decides to go across the Atlantic, barely alive, touches land, which he referred to as Hispaniola. We call that the Columbian moment, the moment in which these two worlds begin to collide. That the Europeans did not know that this world was here, so they referred to it as a new world, right? They were referred to as the old world, and all the exchanges and everything that took place over the course of hundreds of years after that Columbian moment. Maybe we could refer to as part of the age of exploration and the age of discovery, right? You're discovering new areas, right? Those two terms are a little bit different. You can't have an age of discovery without an age of exploration, right? First, uh, the mindset of exploration gets developed by Europeans who then embark upon the oceanic revolution, find new land, or in their mind, it's new for the millions of people who've been there. It wasn't very new. Um, but that moment, and then the age of discovery, where they're beginning to colonize and all these other types of things. Settler colonialism follows the age of discovery, or is part of the age of discovery. But I want to talk a little bit more about what brought about the ocean. I'm sorry, what brought about the age of exploration? That term, the oceanic revolution, right? When we think of something today in our society as a revolution, you think of newness, you think of innovation. Although the term actually was used previously to kind of revolve backwards, to go back to something good. In our society, we use the term now to kind of define a breaking moment of change, right? And the oceanic revolution is something that we define as this change that took place in the minds of Europeans in terms of how they perceived the Atlantic Ocean, right? Prior to um, that Columbian moment, or even earlier, because you could make the argument that Henry the Navigator and the Portuguese uh, kind of embarked upon the age of exploration first, and even the Chinese under Zheng He and those great grand expeditions that took place in the earlier 15th century. Those could arguably be something that stimulated this age of exploration as well. But let's say at the early 1400s, right? Most Europeans considered the ocean an anti-world, a place that you did not go into. Um, it's a myth that people thought the world was flat by then. There was people who thought all kinds of stuff, right? But scholars, the intellectuals, people who were the learned people of society, many of them had already came to the conclusion that the world was round of some sort. I mean, the ancient Greeks calculated the circumference of the world much earlier, right? So it wasn't that they thought it was flat and you'd fall off. It was that they felt if you go out into the ocean, um, that's not a place where it's going to take you anywhere. It's dangerous. There's monsters. There's sea monsters. There's massive winds and places where you just kind of get attacked or whatever. You look at these maps, right? Cartography, the study of maps and map makers and map making. Cartography. If you look at some of these maps, these primary sources from this time period. By the way, some of those are in the sixth floor of the UTA library. It's a really good uh, place to study cartography. They have a lot of old maps. But if you look at some of these old maps, you got these weird looking monsters coming out of the sea, eating, swallowing up ships. If you saw that on a map, you're not trying to go out there, right? That's a reflection of how Europeans perceived the ocean. They went around it. They went on the sides of it. They'd hugged the coast of Africa. They had been trading in West Africa. Um, for a good while. Um, right? They were going there to seek gold and iron and all and pepper and salt and all these other things that you may have read about a little bit. Um, when we talk about Africa being a sort of epicenter of trade, before the complex brought Europeans to that continent to take African people or black bodies. They first came for trade and had all kinds of influences over there, right? Um, so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about going out into the ocean. This was something that was risky. Um, Columbus took a risk. He got the funding, mainly due to the fact that the Portuguese and the Spanish were already at each other's throats now at this point in time. There were a lot of reasons why you could make the argument that Europeans were kind of I don't want to say predestined, but they had the cultural conditions that led them to want to make these decisions to go out into the ocean, right? For one, resources are very scant throughout Europe. Not very much grows in Europe compared to Africa or the Americas. Land is very close knit. Um, Different groups of people kind of close to each other. Not very many strong river systems compared to Africa. Um, and the Silk Road that Europeans got exotic goods from, which goes back to ancient stories, even in Roman times. But Marco Polo's book really kind of hit home for a lot of people. This exotic and what we call Orientalism, or the fascination with the other, right? That was on a lot of people's minds as well in the 1400s. And when the Ottoman Empire comes in and conquers Constantinople in the 1450s, that sort of shut off a lot of the trade routes from the Silk Roads. And it motivated Europeans then to sort of look beyond, right? Um, and this kind of is what we mean by an oceanic revolution. The manner in which Europeans reimagined the ocean, no longer as a anti-world, but now as a highway to some particular destination. Right? That's in fact what Columbus was doing. He knew the world was round. He felt if he went out to this highway, he could go all the way around, make his way up into Asia, because many of the goods and the exotic commodities that Europeans coveted that came from Asia to them was cut off due to particularly the Crusades, the violent struggles between Christianity and Islam, the stronghold of Islamic empires in the Iberian Peninsula. All of these sort of things kind of caused a lot of strife, a lot of war, and made those Arab caravans that were coming from China all the way to these various road systems throughout Eastern Europe and Europe, made them less uh, secure, and so it motivated yet again Europeans to move out, right? Um, and during this whole process, as this reimagination takes place, all of a sudden now you can gain significant status from being someone who goes out and explores and brings back information, right? That's what I mean by glory, right? So it brings a significant transformation to that feudalistic system that Europe operated under, right? Feudalism is a sort of like a economic system, a social system, what we call a manorial system, in which you have peasants and lords who are granted titles by the king and his aristocratic circle, and those titles provide those noblemen with rights over the land. They get peasants to cultivate the land, and if anything goes wrong, the king needs the nobleman's favors. Then the nobleman goes to his peasants, suits them up. They go to war if they need to be, things like that. And the church was very much interconnected to this whole system as well, right? This is a system. If this were a world history class, something of that nature, we talk more about how that system kind of emerged in the Middle Ages, um, after the fall of Rome, so to speak. Ultimately, um, the church structure, social structures begin to reflect the cultural legacy of the destruction of the Roman Empire. But anyway, um, the point that we're trying to make here is that manorial system, that feudalistic system that did not allow for social mobility or that merchant class to really be valued, now all of a sudden it's breaking down. It's being replaced with this new system where glory, where you may not be a nobleman, but if you are on a ship and you make your way across the Atlantic and you survive some amazing journey and you come back to tell your story about it, now you got capital. By capital, I mean status, right? Um, uh, Not financial. We'll talk about that here in a minute because that refers to the third G, right? Um, is what we're trying to describe here is these three G's: God, gold, and glory. These are the things that the cultural lens, so to speak, that Europeans embarking upon the age of exploration had through which they saw the world that they encountered through these three G's after the Oceanic Revolution. Glory comes from this ability to have this capital, I think, in this new kind of mercantilist system or the merchant class system, right? Um, and then also gold. By gold, we sort of mean also resources, but the Spanish were some of the first ones to make their way to the areas that had a lot of bullion, right? And that's very important for understanding why the Spanish make their way to where they go, right? The Treaty of Tordesillas in the 1490s between Portugal and Spain, that was brokered by the Pope because they were two Catholic powers. He didn't want arguing with each other. Essentially, placed locations on where you go if you're part of the Spanish Empire and you want to go across the age of exploration and do business here versus if you belong to the Portuguese Empire. And they sort of literally drew a line in the world and said on one side, this is Spanish territory, the other side is going to be Portuguese territory. And prior, uh, or after that line, before that line, they didn't really know where Mexico was. It just so happened that Spain is the one that got to this area of South America and Central America that were so rich in bullion. Um, and this, in fact, had a tremendous influence on the way New Spain emerged, right? In fact, the people that they sent to New Spain uh, were aristocrats, soldiers, were people who were high up in importance in Spanish society that they could sort of recreate a Spanish society through what we call a frontier of inclusion, right? They tried to sort of breed Spanishness into the indigenous population, um, which was much different, say, than what the English did when they came. They tried to sort of stamp out indigenous. They call them a frontier of exclusion in a way. Um, but well, that's something maybe for a different discussion. Now, my point is in this lecture, I hope that you can really kind of go back, listen, pay attention, highlight some of the important parts, is for you to understand what the Oceanic Revolution is, why it emerged, um, know the difference between the age of exploration, the age of discovery, although they're kind of connected to each other. Um, Understand what brought Europeans over the Atlantic Ocean, and what did they do when they got there. Um, some people refer to that as the Columbian Exchange or the Transatlantic Exchange. Alfred Crosby is a very important historian who sort of groundbreakingly um, reshape the direction that we focus our attention on as historians, like by looking at germs and looking at animals, like what happens when Spaniards bring horses to the New World and let them go, or pigs. What happens when Spaniards go to an island in Hispaniola? They want to make sure they got a food source. They eat a lot of pork, so they dump a bunch of pigs, and pigs just sort of run wild into an area where they didn't exist before, stomping all over the environment, um, inadvertently planting seeds that were in their hooves from the old world into the new world. Um, you know, uh, Deforestation, just I mean, all kinds of repercussions of bringing and introducing new ecological aspects or new animals and plants, flora and fauna into new ecologies or new environments, and what impact did that have? Alfred Crosby's book helped bring that about. But anyway, all right, we'll start another one next time.